to the Energy Tech Podcast presented by Upside Energy. Today we're filming live from ENTELEC 2026 and we are excited to welcome Mike Tilman, an Edge Innovator. Guys, welcome to Galveston.
Hey Jeff, it is good to be here. I am your co-host Mike Flores with the Energy Tech Podcast, again live right here in Galveston, Texas as part of ENTELEC 2026. And what we're here doing is really talking to different end users and guests and vendors and participants here at ENTELEC as part of the community. And one of the community members that's been around for quite some time is Mr. Mike Tilman, one of the Edge innovators in the space. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mike. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you, man. And, you know, when I've heard about you and your name, but when I really was intrigued was when we saw you yesterday. You engaged with us a little bit in a conversation with Autosol and Neve in one of those sessions yesterday morning. So it was really good to see some of the questions. You stepped right in and, you know, I was really impressed by the way you did that, and that brought in a lot of different questions. And so I wanted to ask you, Mike, you know, kind of give us your background, man. Where have you been? What are you doing these days, and your relationship in the space with ENTELEC?
I started out, I got my first computer in 1982 when I was just a teenager. I've been in the technology ever since. I was hooked on it. 2003, I started my own computer company. 2004, I started my own consulting company in the IT space and providing initial services for small wildcatters in western Oklahoma and the Texas Panhandle. Several years later, I got an offer to take a position with a major oil and gas company in the industry. That grew my knowledge base because I was working with things that I didn't do as a small company. I've worked with microwave and narrowband radios and broadband radios and all of that. And recently I left that company, left on good terms, but they're supporting me and they always supported me and allowed me to do consulting even while I was working with them. But now I'm expanding that. The last 5 years I was supporting their innovation, their new ventures in communications with edge compute. I provided the communications and networking support for their data strategy group in growing out how they do edge compute, how they do virtualized computer systems that operate in the plants rather than just the ones that operate in the data centers like most people are traditionally used to.
That's interesting. You know, so it sounds to me like what you were doing was providing some digital strategy related to how they're using, let's just say, their OT field systems and integrating with their IT business, and then how they're leveraging that to the edge in the field, right? Would you say that's kind of what you were doing?
Yeah, telecom has always been the translators between the OT environment and the IT environment to begin with. The thing that we're running into now is that everybody wants so much data, but security is such a big thing that figuring out how to get those massive amounts of data from what needs to be a secure and commonly virtually air-gapped environment into a data lake so people can process that and use it.
Yeah, so you bring that about. Let me ask you, because you told us before, you were with this large producer. They are a publicly traded large producer. What were some of those initial challenges you got from both operations and I wouldn't say the executive, but let's say a management team on the business side?
The issues that you run into there is, first of all, being secure. People aren't used to putting a computer in an environment where they generally have a PLC that runs everything locally. It talks from one device to another and controls that set of devices and never talks out. It might report to a SCADA system, but those devices don't ever go on the network because of vulnerabilities. Also, they're used to hard-coded systems. They're not used to dynamic PCs, industrial PCs in that environment because there's so much opportunity for device failure or things like that. Also, and we just had a conversation yesterday with another producer. I've been using these for 30 years. I know how they work. What you're talking about is new technology that's unproven in the field. So what makes you think I want to put something that's only been used for 2 to 3 years in an environment that's used to having a 30-year runtime before we ever adopt that technology?
No, I think you're right. So what I'm hearing is you have the legacy argument, and then you have a new technology argument. Would you say, Mike, that a lot of times when you're really looking at that, there's two things that matter, and that is the value to the business and the risk to the business versus whether or not equipment's older or not?
Absolutely. And we as technology providers, as technology propagators, have to figure out that balance, and we have to help both sides understand the risks and the values and find that middle ground, because I don't want to push a technology on somebody that's just going to sabotage it for the sake of their own internal security.
Right.
But I want them to trust in that technology. I want to figure out what they need to know, and I want to put the testing behind something so they understand when I put this in their environment, I'm not doing it arbitrarily. I'm doing it because I believe we can both trust it to serve the way it's supposed to.
Got it. So it sounds to me like what you're saying is that, especially right now, Mike, you mentioned earlier, so you stepped away from this producer and now you're on the consulting side, and it sounds like you're carrying the same message that you did with the producer that you're doing now as on the consulting side, and that is you still want to be an enabler. You just want to have that conversation, right?
Absolutely. My consulting work, I do not just for endpoint customers. I also consult for tower companies or value-added resellers and for vendors, and I work for those people and have told them flat out, just because you're the one that shows me this device doesn't mean this device is the one I'm going to sell to my customer.
Right.
That customer may not do well with that device, and I don't want them to sell them something that's not going to perform well for them. I don't want that to come back on me, and I don't want that to come back on your product, because that product may serve them perfectly in the next iteration, but it won't in this one, and I don't want to blacklist your device on their network because it doesn't fit this application.
Yeah, so you bring up a good point, and I do want to ask you this, Mike. Now that you're on this side of the business, do you look at this when you're looking at someone's architecture? I always defer back to someone that has coined the phrase the unified namespace, which is a guy named Walker Reynolds. I think we both know him. One of the things he points out in the unified namespace, the UNS, as the single source of truth, he talks about having a system that is lightweight, report by exception, right? So he has some criteria, has a minimum technical spec. Do you feel like that's part of a mantra that you kind of look at and you maybe apply it, or do you have your own?
The whole point of edge compute and this new data model that everybody's moving to is to provide the most amount of data you can, because it's not about the data we have now or that we need right now. It's about the data we don't know we need yet to make correlations in the future. But the unified namespace is about contextualizing that data so that whenever it goes into that data lake, you don't need an engineer with a secret decoder ring like he mentioned yesterday to understand what that data is. You may go into one plant and they decided not to name the points that they're polling. They decided to assign numbers to that.
Yes.
And then another one's going to assign acronyms to it. And then another one is going to assign arbitrary names to things so that if somebody intercepts that data, it's somewhat encrypted.
Yeah.
But what the unified namespace is for is to contextualize that so that whenever we pull it off of that PLC or that EFM or that RTU, when it hits the data lake, it's in a context that an AI engine or an LLM can apply its analytics to and provide you with the most use case.
You're right. And so I think there's a context that comes across from the edge all the way into the data lake, right? And, one of the things that a challenge that we have for the client that we're working with in oil and gas is you have the PLC group, you have your automation group. Mm-hmm. So they're doing their work. And you're right. So they have their nomenclature. And then, usually you're going to define those UDTs as part of that nomenclature so that you can carry that data over. And it has nice semantics to it, right? It's semantic.
Right.
And so what has happened, though, is that you may have data engineering that has a flavor of product that they like. What I mean by that is they may be used to using something like IoT Core.
Right.
And they just want to bring it flat JSON versus Sparkplug, which gives them a little more data. And so they use a euphemism. I've heard, they call it data enriching. And to me, that's a euphemism for, we'll take your data and we're going to add some things that make sense to us on the data lake side. So they call it data enrichment. And that seems to be a nice way of saying we're going to spend more money on data engineering. But what you just said earlier was you don't have to do that, especially if you're leveraging the unified namespace.
And especially if you're just getting into the edge market and you haven't done a lot of it, you can create your unified namespace. You really want to create your unified namespace before you ever deploy your first device.
Yes.
Because it doesn't matter what you call it on the PLC or what you call it on the EFM or if you have numbered points or what, because whenever that device reports up, it's going to name it how it goes on the broker. So if you plan properly, you don't have to go in and retrofit everything, and you don't have to go in and re-engineer and rename your things. You can actually go in and push the new name into the data lake without ever changing and having to redo your point-to-points and your SCADA naming system and all of that.
Yeah, so and that's a really good point you're talking about. So it kind of lays in with that whole making it, a report by exception model, right, with MQTT, because I think we're both alluding to the idea that in this case, you can leverage things like MQTT. You can still have devices that fit OPC UA and the edge, for collecting. But at the end of the day, it sounds like, hey, we've got a broker. We're going to go MQTT. We leverage Sparkplug B. We carry that over to, let's say, a cloud application, or we do it at the edge, whichever side you choose. And so you're really talking about flexibility. And tell me a little bit more kind of about your mindset when you're working. Now that you're on the consulting side, I think it's important that anybody that's listening, Mike, that you explain, hey, Mike, it's not just about MQTT and things like that, but what other parts in your mind are things that you look at?
Well, it doesn't have to be MQTT. It doesn't have to be edge support. Even if you acquisitions are big right now, like they mentioned yesterday, big companies are buying medium companies are buying small companies are buying out individual producers. If you want something to match your system, you could even put an IPC out on the site that does polling of the device and then responds to polls on a poll response system if that's what your SCADA model is, but it will rename it so your points in your point-to-point match up and so that your points in your data lake fit a unified namespace.
Yeah.
You don't have to rip and replace. You can put in a small augmentation device.
Or an orchestrator.
Or an orchestrator. You can do it at an orchestrator. You can do it at a broker in between. You can even put a small broker at each site or even at each wellhead if you want to. That's going to provide translation for you. The important thing is, right now, they're already making correlations on data that's been collected over the last couple of years. They never thought they could, to do preventive maintenance and predictive maintenance and things like that. But one of the big things they're running into is, okay, we found out we can look at these particular points to do predictive maintenance, but we've not been collecting those points.
Yeah, so you bring up a good point right there, Mike, and that is that I think one thing that you learn once you implement something similar to whether that's UNS or once you start making data the commodity in your business, right? Once you start carrying, it sounds to me like what you're saying is that you're going to start uncovering things that you never saw with the naked eye, that maybe never came to an alarm banner, whatever the case is, that you're actually uncovering more data, right?
Absolutely. And right now, because of whole response and narrowband SCADA systems, we've been collecting as little data as we could because we don't want to overload our data collection systems. And we're to the point now where we don't want to do that anymore. We want to collect every piece of information we can. Yeah, that information might sit in the data lake for 5 years and never be used, but in 5 years, they might find a correlation based on the data we've collected, because we're getting into that new AI age. And whether you like public AI or you want to use a private system or whatever, we are going to be using AI to do our predictions in the future because it's the best way to save money and the best way to make money.
No, and you bring a good point there. And, let's talk about it because you brought it up. Artificial intelligence, Mike, has just exploded. So it has exploded. And you've got, I'll give you an example. We met with a client in Houston, and this was last year. And one of the things they said was they had a company that could come in and in about 6 weeks can use AI to use their data, and they had a compression fleet topics and things on their compression fleet. Okay. And in my mind, it was like, you can't do that in 6 weeks, because I truly believed you had to start from the problem. You had to go to the source of the data and organize some level of UDTs or determine an orchestration methodology before you can start ingesting data and then start what I call like data engineering. Like
Right.
there's some things you have to do. Do you feel like there's some companies and groups that are saying, well, AI is going to fix it without considering some sort of data lineage or saying we really need to organize our data?
Well, the key is AI is going to fix what?
Yeah.
You've got to know what you want to fix before you implement AI, because if you're putting in AI, you have to have a purpose. You can't just do it just so you can say I have AI. If you want AI to solve maintenance problems, then you have to understand how you're going to get that maintenance data to the AI. If you want AI to streamline your business processes, that's fairly easy because you put in your business flowcharts and you let it look at where we're having jam ups.
Right.
It depends on what part of your business you want AI to work in, but it also is going to depend on what you feed it. Do you want to feed it public documents? Do you want to feed it private documents? Because more than anything, AI is you are what you eat. Whatever you feed it's what you're going to get out. If you're feeding it garbage, you're going to get garbage back. It doesn't matter how much garbage you feed it, it's still garbage.
Yeah, and you know, Mike, I think you're saying what I'm hearing. You know, a lot of experience in this industry is saying is that, you know, the AI is not the fix. It is the commodity of your data and making that important. Right.
Yeah, AI is another tool. All AI does is the same thing our data scientists have been doing for years. It just does it faster because it doesn't have the shoulder taps and the phone calls, and it doesn't have to use a keyboard. It's doing the exact same thing that our data scientists do if it's programmed right, because it was told to do it that way. It can just do it faster because it doesn't have the limitations that a human does.
So, in your experience right now, if you had to really tell anybody, hey, you know, if you're going to leverage AI, especially in the industrial space, in energy, what are the top three things that you think you want them to consider?
Accurate data,
Yeah.
data access, because it doesn't matter what data you want to give it and what data you want it to process. If it can't get to that data, it can't do anything. And right now, our stuff is siloed.
Yes.
You know, so many, if you want to get to maintenance stuff, you have to go to this program. If you want to go to production information, you have to go to this other program. If you want to go to business algorithms, you have to go to this other program. That stuff's all siloed. It's all on, you know, privileged accounts. You have to understand your security risks and things like that. And so those are the big things. You have to do data access, you have to do security, and you have to do quality of the data processed.
Yes.
If you're trying to pull in maintenance records from 15 facilities and those 15 facilities don't have any way to tell you that this is the same valve at those 15 facilities, it doesn't matter how good your AI is, it can't decide, is that the same valve? You have to tell it, or you have to figure out. That's where things like unified namespace and your UDTs and properly naming things comes in.
Wow, that's great. You know, I did want to mention, Mike, that, or you want to, if you want to mention, you've been in the ENTELEC community for a bit. Kind of tell us, you know, I want to pivot there real quick for a moment. You know, what part you play as part of ENTELEC. I think you're on one of the committees as well.
Yes, I've been in with ENTELEC for a number of years now. For the last 5 years, I've served on the Cybersecurity subcommittee and as chair of that committee for the last 2 years. ENTELEC is amazing. It's not just a conference, and we had that discussion on Josh Voorhees. We had that discussion recently, because what's the difference between a conference and a community?
Yeah.
You know, anybody can go to a conference. If you go to a conference and you feel like just another number when you're walking around and just another client to sell to, then you're going to a conference. But ENTELEC is a community where you make those relationships.
Yeah.
You get to meet people and you talk to those people outside of ENTELEC. You know, you establish those relationships where there's a phone call every once in a while. You grab lunch with somebody that you met at ENTELEC. You have dinner, or you go to the bar after the conference with somebody and not just go to see who's there.
Got it.
And with the cybersecurity subcommittee, we are branching out a little bit with that now. We're going to be building a matrix, and we've got a webinar coming up. And the goal of that webinar is we're going to pull all of our cybersecurity related ENTELEC members. We're going to list a handful of risks that are risks in cybersecurity and OT and automation.
Yeah.
We're going to have an expert in each of those categories explain why it's a risk and some potentials for mitigation. Then we're going to list all of our ENTELEC members who can help your company with that, so that we're not just creating another training that people are going to look at. They're going to forget what they trained on. We're creating resources for our community because we want everybody in the community to be safe, and we want everybody to know what's available. Whether you're a $100 million company or a $100,000 company, we want you to have those same access to resources because we want everybody in our environment to be successful, not just this guy or that guy or the guy that's got the biggest checkbook.
Wow. Mike, those are some great things about INTELEC, the community. And when do you expect maybe that webinar might be out?
I don't know. We're hoping to possibly do it in the end of May or June, but it's going to depend on when we can schedule it with our members because everybody's busy and we're just swinging into our project season. So once we get that list together and I get it scheduled, I'll get back with you and you can mention it.
Absolutely. We love to do that. And so, you know what, Mike, you made some great points. I think what you're saying is the community isn't just coming together and you walk away with merch. This is about a community that comes together, provides resources that are valuable within the community itself, and you can share those externally. That provides growth to the community, provides more value, and just continues to bring that to the community, right?
Exactly. And if you look, anybody can go online and look at our schedule. You probably could get $100,000 worth of training this week for the cost of your corporate membership or for the cost of your attending this conference. It's not expensive to attend. It's not expensive for corporate membership. Corporate members can send as many people from their company as they want to this training. We've got major people like we have X here today. We have Starlink here today. We have FortiGate's doing 2 different trainings today. Fortinet is. Cisco's done training. We have it all across the board. Those are just a few, by no means an inclusive list.
Right.
And we also have our fall seminar that will come up. It's usually held in Odessa. And it's not free to corporate members, but it is discounted. And it is geared more towards your field techs. We recommend you send your field people to the training there because we offer the same quality of training geared a little bit differently, and it's in a field location. So you don't have to take your people out of the field for 4 or 5 days to get them a few hours of training.
Wow. Okay. And they can do that in the fall, right?
They can do that in the fall, usually in October.
Okay. Usually in October. Is it similar to having a conference style area?
It's a conference style area, but it's only a couple of days. We come in, usually come in on Tuesday, have the conference all day on Wednesday, and leave out either Wednesday night or Thursday morning.
Okay, and then do you have other vendors that are there as well, or just specific? Awesome.
It'll be a handful. It's not as big as this by any means. But we usually have 2 or 3 of our vendors there. We have a couple of displays, and we have a different scope of training, but it is the same quality of training.
Great, Mike, that sounds great. And I'll tell you what, as a media sponsor here for Energy Tech, we'd love to be there in October, just to get word out, just to continue to communicate the community, so definitely if you can, invite us. We want to be a part of that. And Mike, we think you're adding a lot of value here. Just like you heard, that's about $100,000 at least worth of training that you get as part of your membership. You do the math. If you brought in a couple, 2 or 3, 4 or 5 folks, that is quite a value for anybody that's looking for training. And with that, Mike, I want to keep you. This was a great episode, but we're running out of time. And it was great to have Mr. Mike Tilman here, one of the Edge Innovators. He's here at INTELEC 2026. Look out for him. You don't want to put you on the spot, Mike, but people can look out for you. He is here. And I am your co-host, Mike Flores, with the Energy Tech Podcast right here in Galveston, Texas at INTELEC 2026. Like and subscribe. Mike, it was great having you, man, on the show.
Thanks, Mike. I've appreciated it.
That was great.